Welcome to the deep dive. Every single day our news feeds are just, well, they're overflowing. It makes it really tough to keep up with everything, doesn't it? Global events, policy shifts right here at home.
It's a lot, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So our mission today, we want to cut through all that noise for you. We've basically grabbed a snapshot, August 28th, 2025, looked at the biggest global and U.S. stories from just that one day.
Hmm.
And we're going to pull out the key bits, the insights you really need. Think of it as your shortcut to being properly informed.
And it's pretty amazing how much you can see shifting in just 24 hours. A single day, like this one, can really lay bare these big geopolitical currents, surprising things happening domestically, societal pressures.
Right.
So this deep dive, it's about giving you that clarity, helping you see the bigger picture without, feeling totally swamped.
Okay, let's dive right in then. Some major global flashpoints first, where, well, conflict and diplomacy look pretty strained. Let's start with Ukraine. Grim news there. On August 28th, Russian forces launched what's being called one of their biggest missile and drone attacks on Kyiv. Really devastating. Reports say at least 21 people killed, including kids.
Terrible.
And they hit places like the EU delegation, the British Council offices, real symbols of Western support.
Mm-hmm. Deliberate targets.
And what's really striking, I think, is the timing. This huge attack came just weeks after those high-profile peace talks in Alaska with President Trump and Putin.
Right. It seems to just fly in the face of any diplomatic effort.
Exactly. An acceleration of violence despite those talks.
Well, coming so soon after supposed progress, it really reveals Moscow's playbook, doesn't it? It seems like they're trying to raise the stakes, make Western support more costly, and basically reshape negotiations through force.
So diplomacy alone isn't enough from their view.
Apparently not without ongoing military pressure. It's a stark signal. Now, international condemnation, as you'd expect, was immediate. President Zelensky asking again for tougher sanctions, more accountability.
Fine.
Yeah, and most analysts, they pretty much agree. This attack, it's a massive blow to peace prospects. It really hardens European resolve.
Yeah.
Even though Moscow, denies they were targeting civilians.
Okay, so while that's escalating in Ukraine, we saw a similar kind of intensification in the Middle East on the very same day.
Right.
Israel stepped up its operations around Gaza City. They're describing it as the last major Hamas stronghold in that conflict that's been going on since, October 2023. And medics there reported at least 16 deaths from intensified bombardment just that day. And this is happening while there are these big protests back in Israel, people demanding faster action on getting hostages released.
And that timing is crucial. The push on Gaza City happening right when aid groups are screaming for access.
Yeah.
It highlights this critical shift in how military actions are being judged globally. Well, tactical gains on the ground are being weighed very publicly against this immediate, very severe humanitarian cost. And that could really affect international support down the line. The UN, aid leaders, they were putting out urgent warnings. Avert starvation, expand access, famine, medical system collapse. Those are the fears.
So the increased military action suggests bigger urban operations might be coming.
It's certainly pointed that way. And with that comes, much more intense international scrutiny on how those operations are conducted.
Okay, shifting gears slightly, but staying with international tension, Europe made a big move regarding Iran.
Yes, the snapback.
Right. On August 28th, Britain, France, and Germany triggered this snapback process. It's part of that 2015 Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA. And it basically lets them restore UN sanctions without needing a new Security Council vote if Iran isn't holding up its end of the deal.
And that's exactly what they argued. They formally told the UN Security Council Iran breached its commitments, and importantly, it refused proposals for inspections and de-escalation.
So what does this mean, practically?
Well, if it goes through, it's a 30-day process. It restores UN measures on things like arms sales, uranium enrichment, designated individuals. That makes life much harder for Iran's economy and its military procurement.
How did Iran react?
Tehran's foreign minister denounced it, called it harmful, but also said, Iran was willing to resume fair talks if the West showed goodwill. But the Europeans clearly felt they had to act.
And Russia and China, they can't veto this.
Technically, no, not at the Security Council. But, and this is important, analysts fully expect them to try and undermine its enforcement. through side deals, maybe just refusing to comply with everything. It creates a real enforcement headache.
Okay, now let's connect this to trade. The U.S. made a move against India using tariffs.
Yeah, another angle on geopolitics.
President Trump announced on the 28th 50% tariffs on certain Indian imports. And the reason given quite explicitly was India buying Russian energy defying Western sanctions.
And this really shows how economic tools are becoming, well, weapons in the geopolitical arena. A senior White House trade advisor actually spelled it out. Potential tariff relief for India was linked to cutting back on Russian oil.
Wow, so a direct link.
Absolutely. Puts India at a really tight spot. They have to balance their energy needs, which are critical, with wanting deeper ties with the U.S. And, of course, it could mess with global oil flows, too.
Okay, let's bring it home now to the U.S. political scene. Some major fault lines showing up. First, a big shakeup at the CDC.
Right, the Centers for Disease Control.
President Trump made what was seen as a pretty controversial call, ending CDC Director Susan Mons's time there. It was quite brief.
Very brief.
And this led to, apparently, dozens of staff walking out. 4 top officials actually resigned in protest. Jim O'Neill was then named acting director.
Yeah, this immediately brings up that constant tension, doesn't it? Politics versus science.
Yep.
I mean, the big risk here, when you see leadership changes that look politicized at a top science agency, is trust. Public trust in official guidance just erodes, and that's, well, it's critical during any health crisis.
And it impacts preparedness, too, presumably.
Absolutely. Pandemic preparedness, disease surveillance, these things rely on stability and scientific integrity. So you have critics saying this politicization undermines trust, while, administration supporters are defending it, calling it necessary reform.
And staying with federal agencies, the Fed itself is facing a legal challenge.
Yes, Governor Lisa Cook.
On the 28th, she actually filed a lawsuit against President Trump over his move to fire her. She's claiming the reasons given these allegations about falsified mortgage records were basically an overreach of presidential power.
This is a big one. It really hits at the core of the Federal Reserve's independence. Legal experts think this could be a really long court battle.
Setting a precedent, maybe.
Exactly. It could set a major precedent for how central banks are governed. And Governor Cook's supporters, they're arguing her removal threatens the Fed's credibility and ultimately the stability of economic policy itself. Definitely one to watch.
Okay, now let's look at Washington, D.C. itself, law enforcement there. There was renewed praise on August 28th for the administration's decision to federalize law enforcement in the city. This came after a surge of federal officers was deployed, and reports are coming out about dramatic drops in things like carjackings and other crimes. Even the mayor, Muriel Bowser, publicly backed the extra police presence.
Right, but this is where you see that constant balancing act, isn't it? Security versus social justice.
Explain that a bit.
Well, on one hand, you have reports of crime dropping, maybe some residents and business owners feeling safer. But on the other hand, critics are really worried about the potential for racial profiling, the long-term impact on civil rights.
So pushback from rights groups.
Oh, absolutely. Figures like Reverend Al Sharpton denounced it, calling it basically a cover for discriminatory practices. So it really highlights that complex struggle in cities everywhere.
And the echoes of January 6th are still present. A decision came down on August 28th regarding Ashley Babbitt.
Yes, the Air Force veteran involved in the Capitol breach.
Right. She was fatally shot by Capitol Police during the events of January 6, 2021, while trying to get into the speaker's lobby. She's become, well, a polarizing figure.
Very much so.
The Air Force announced they were granting her military funeral honors. This was actually a reversal of an earlier decision, and it came after some kind of settlement with her family.
And the reaction was, as you'd expect, completely divided. Supporters praised the decision. Critics argued it essentially whitewashes an attack where, scores of police officers were injured.
So it shows how that day is still shaving things.
Absolutely. It demonstrates how the politics, the narratives around January 6th are still deeply influencing civil-military relations, public memory, years later.
Okay, one more executive action from that day. President Trump signed an order impacting federal workers' unions.
Yeah, collective bargaining.
He signed an order ending collective bargaining for certain federal union units.
This is significant. It could really reshape labor relations across government agencies. We're talking about unions that currently negotiate for, tens of thousands of federal employees.
So what's the expected fallout?
Well, the unions immediately vowed to fight it in court, in Congress, but supporters of the move argue it's about streamlining government, making it more efficient, maybe reducing costs. It definitely raises big questions about the future direction of federal labor rights.
All right, let's shift now to look at some broader societal pressures, economic shifts, and tragically, this includes a school shooting in Minneapolis.
Just awful news from that day.
Yeah, on August 28th, gunfire broke out at the Annunciation School in South Minneapolis, actually during Mass. 2 children were killed, 17 other people injured. The shooter, identified as 23-year-old Robin Westman, then reportedly took his own life. The FBI opened investigations into it as both a potential hate crime and domestic terrorism.
And what you see immediately in these situations is that that raw, visceral community reaction, just heartbreak and anger.
Calls for vigils, renewed debate on gun control.
Exactly. And it stands in such sharp contrast to the, frankly, stalled national debate on how to actually prevent these things.
Yeah.
This terrible event, sadly, fits into that broader, deeply disturbing pattern of violence in public spaces. It just reignites those calls for reform, for better mental health screening, addressing the root causes.
Turning to the economy now, a permanent change in U.S. trade policy was announced, the end of the de minimis import tax exemption.
Right. This might sound technical, but it's actually a pretty big deal for online shopping.
Explain de minimis quickly.
Sure. It basically allowed packages under a certain value, used to be $800, to come into the U.S. without import duties or taxes. This really fueled the rise of, ultra-cheap e-commerce from overseas, especially from companies like Shein and Temu.
Okay, so the administration announced on the 28th that ending this exemption is now permanent, part of a broader trade crackdown, they said.
And the ripple effects are significant. Retailers, especially those relying on that direct-to-consumer import model, they're going to face higher costs, maybe shipping delays.
But who benefits?
Domestic manufacturers, unions. They've been lobbying against de minimis for years. They cheered the decision, arguing it levels the playing field for American businesses. So, yeah, it's a major shift in how global trade, particularly e-commerce, works with the U.S.
Interesting. But despite all this global and domestic turmoil, Wall Street seemed pretty happy on August 28th.
Yeah, markets hit new records. The S&P 500, the Dow Jones, both closed at all-time highs that day.
What was driving that? Still the AI boom?
Largely, yes.
Yeah.
The so-called AI trade was strong. NVIDIA just put out great quarterly results, which kind of reinforced the idea that demand for AI infrastructure is still booming.
Anything else?
Yeah. There were also some decent economic signals. Fewer people filing for unemployment, corporate profits looking better. That boosted confidence.
So good news for investors.
Well, yes, it boosted household wealth, pension balances, all that. But it also brought back those debates about, is the market rally too narrow? Are valuations getting too high?
Right. Is it sustainable?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And investors were already betting pretty heavily on the Fed cutting interest rates in September. So the next batch of inflation data will be really crucial. It'll test if this rally has legs. Is it fundamental growth, or is some of it just, speculation?
Okay, and one last item in this section. Travel headaches. Major air travel disruptions.
Ah, yes. Just in time for the Labor Day weekend rush.
Right. On the 28th, flights out of Newark Airport were grounded, apparently due to air traffic control failures.
Then that caused chaos. Thousands of travelers facing delays, cancellations. Not just at Newark, it had knock-on effects nationwide. People were understandably frustrated.
What does this highlight? Bigger picture.
It just throws a spotlight back onto our transportation infrastructure. It reignites that whole debate about needing more investment, needing better systems that are resilient to these kinds of failures, especially when demand is high.
Okay, let's broaden out one last time to cover some diverse headlines, culture, environment, justice issues from August 28th. First, devastating floods in Pakistan.
Yeah, a huge humanitarian crisis unfolding there.
Heavy rains, combined with water releases from dams in India, caused major rivers in Pakistan's Punjab province to just overflow their banks.
The scale was immense. Reports said it affected something like 1.2 million people, displaced nearly 250,000. Rescuers were scrambling to reach stranded families.
What are the longer-term concerns?
Huge concerns. Humanitarian agencies were warning about severe health impacts, disease spread, plus massive crop losses, and people being displaced for a long, long time. And it puts pressure on both India and Pakistan to actually work together on managing water resources and disaster planning.
A climate change angle too, presumably?
Absolutely. It's that dangerous mix of climate change impacts and complex cross-border water management issues.
Okay, shifting to something much lighter entertainment. A huge hit for Netflix.
Right, K-pop Demon Hunters.
On August 28th, it was reported this movie became the most watched Netflix film ever. And its soundtrack was topping the Billboard charts, too.
It's fascinating. Industry watchers see this as real proof of how cultural power is shifting globally. Asian media like K-pop and Korean film and TV is increasingly influencing Western tastes, driving new business models. It's not just a niche thing anymore.
A globalized culture, really.
Exactly.
Now, a significant legal outcome in Switzerland concerning Tariq Ramadan.
Yes, the conclusion of a long legal saga.
Switzerland's High Court on the 28th reaffirmed his convictions for rape and sexual coercion.
And again, very divided reactions. Ramadan's supporters maintained the trial was unfair. Opponents saw the ruling as a crucial victory for survivors of sexual assault.
And it has broader implications.
Definitely. The case really fueled these larger, important debates about how justice is pursued for sexual assault, particularly within influential religious and academic communities.
Okay, and finally, a workplace conflict at a tech giant. Microsoft fired 2 employees on August 28th.
This related to protests over the company's ties to Israel.
Right. The employees had apparently occupied a senior executive's office as a protest during the Gaza conflict.
Yeah, and this taps into a wider trend. Employee activism within big tech companies, especially around things like government contracts during wartime or content moderation policies, has really grown.
So how did the different sides frame it?
Well, labor advocates slammed the firings, calling it retaliation against protected speech or protest. Microsoft management, on the other hand, said it was about safety rules and policy violations needing consequences. It really highlights that tricky line between employee expression and corporate rules.
So after walking through just one day, August 28th, 2025, wow, what does it all mean for you listening?
It's a lot to take in, isn't it?
It really is. We've covered this incredible range: international conflicts flaring up, major domestic policy fights, huge economic shifts, cultural moments, and you can see how they're all kind of tangled together.
Yeah, zooming out, that's the key takeaway, I think, that interconnectedness, even things that seem totally separate on the surface. Understanding those threads, how one thing impacts another, helps you move beyond just reading headlines.
To get the real insight.
Exactly. It helps you navigate this incredibly complex world with, hopefully, a bit more clarity.
So here's something to think about as we wrap up. Reflecting on all these things happening simultaneously on just one day, how might individual actions and reactions, whether they come from world leaders, from communities, maybe even from you as a consumer, how might those shape where these stories go next?
Where are the potential turning points?
Right. Where do you see the biggest potential for unexpected shifts or new directions in the coming months? Keep digging, keep asking those questions, stay curious about the world around you.